Prior to the suspension, this Honourable House was in Standing Finance Committee. To that we shall revert.
This House is now in Standing Finance Committee.
Madam Chair, at 89, Ministry of Small Business, Entrepreneurship and Commerce, $8,160,129.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and colleagues. Would you permit me to bring members of the Ministry of Small Business, Entrepreneurship and Commerce to join me?
You may.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Honourable Minister, you may give your opening remarks, at the end of which I ask you to move the head.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, a blessed good evening to my colleagues and members of the Lower Chamber. First, let me begin by introducing those persons who are here with me, close to me in the well. To my right, I have the Permanent Secretary, Mr. Esworth Reed. To my left, I have the Chief Economist, Ms. Katrina Bradshaw. Directly behind Ms. Bradshaw, I have the Acting Director of Commerce and Consumer Affairs, Mr. Bertram Johnson. To his right, I have the Senior Advisor in the Business Unit, Mr. Anderson Cumberbatch. To his right, I have the Head of the Office of Supervisory of Insolvency, Mrs. Esther Springer. Immediately behind Ms. Springer, I have Mr. Jerry Amos, General Manager of the Trust Fund Unit. Next to Mr. Amos, I have the General Manager of Fund Access, Mrs. Esther Lord Graham. Directly behind her is the Chairman of Fund Access, Mr. David Simpson. Directly behind Mr. Simpson, I have Mr. Brent Gittins, who's the Acting Director of the Cooperatives. Directly next to him, I have the Director, the CEO of Fair Trading Commission, Mrs. Sandra Seeley. And directly next to Ms. Seeley on her right is Mr. Blackman, who's the Head of Public Counsel. Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, the government recognizes the need to implement new and modern approaches to growth and development. One such approach is focused on transforming the Barbadian economy using an innovative strategy that is centered around the investment of skills, ideas, and the endeavors of Barbadians. The ultimate aim is to generate new wealth through empowering local entrepreneurs and small businesses to cultivate what we call an entrepreneurial ethos that is nationally pervasive and driven by international foresight. Madam Chair, we as a ministry recognize that there is a need to provide significant access to capital for small businesses and entrepreneurs. This government, in its manifesto, pledged to indeed create wealth from the bottom up in this country. And I spoke to the entrepreneurial ethos, indeed, that we intend to build out for ordinary Barbadians, so that ordinary Barbadians and businesses within the micro, small, and medium enterprise sector get their fair share of wealth creation. Also, Madam Chair, critical to this sector, critical to this country and to the region, and if we examine both regional and extra-regional, we will recognize that the micro, small, and medium enterprise sector accounts for some 40 to 50% of GDP, and that is known. This government recognizes that from the 1990s, the importance of this sector to the country's social and economic development. And in 1998, we started Fund Access. And Fund Access was created to provide microfinancing to the small businesses. And indeed, Fund Access was started under this government back in 1999 because we saw the need to provide opportunities whereby persons can access finance. Fund Access has today disbursed over 1,000 loans to the tune of $68 million in this country. They have allowed some 791 startups and over 800 or so other businesses will have benefited from Fund Access. 68 million from 1998 to present, 68.1 million. Was Fund Access sufficient? The answer is no. We also recognize the lack of skills in terms of financial literacy among our Barbadian population. And indeed, that has created something called asymmetric information within the banking sector. Despite we have liquidity within the banking sector, over $9 billion lying in accounts, earning interest of 0.1%, we cannot access that capital as a result of asymmetric information. What I mean by that, Madam Chair and members of the Chamber, we recognize that for small businesses, they are high risk. And indeed, banks will only lend you money when they recognize that you can repay the loans. And that has been a systemic problem in the system within the micro, small, and medium enterprise sector. And we recognize the lack of knowledge between the working class, the business class, between those persons from the low socioeconomic bracket, in terms of knowledge of finance, in terms of debt management, in terms of how to access loans, in terms of marketing the business. And one of the things that we will speak about this afternoon is the whole aspect of the Financial Literacy Bureau and what we intend to do with that bureau. That bureau is a framework and a policy initiative by this government that intend to go into the households, the communities, and the schools to teach persons how to manage the finances, whether it is debt management, how to read accounting, how to market the business. And this is to change, not a culture, but change behaviors, and indeed allow persons from a very young age to understand how to manage their money. And when you do that, what you're doing, you're seeking to address the asymmetric information challenge that we have currently in this country. And indeed, I think that is what the banking sector is looking for us to do as a ministry, to come up with the policy initiatives that will renown to the benefit of the of the small businesses, the medium-sized enterprises, and the micro enterprises, whereby they can become bankable and access part of that $9 million. If we access 1% of that $9 billion that is sitting down in the banking sector, that renowned to something like $90 million that is available to the small businesses in this country. Madam Chair, over the last decade, we can analyze what was done for the micro, small, and medium enterprise sector within this country. Some may say nothing, but I'm clear that enough was not done to empower and to stimulate growth within that sector. We had persons with wonderful ideas sitting at home. Entrepreneurs, all they needed was a little helping hand. All they needed was a little guidance to allow them to access finance in this country. And that is why growth has plummeted, not because only of investment coming into this country, Madam Chair, but because that critical sector that is instrumental in terms of building out the social and economic landscape in this country, there was a dearth over the last decade. We came to office, Madam Chair, and the first thing we announced was the trust loans. And if we read the manifesto prided itself on creating opportunities for all. And we heard the member from St. Michaelis who speaks to the egalitarian approach, equal opportunities for one and all. And indeed, that is what our manifesto and this ministry was charged with, to build that key sector, hence the trust loans. So fund access started in 1998. We came in 2018, and we provided seed capital for those small and micro businesses who have tremendous ideas, the skills, and what it takes to indeed build up this sector. The only thing they were lacking is financing. And Madam Chair, that was done by this administration. And at the 4th of November in 2018, that's some 6 months after we came to office, we launched the trust fund to provide seed capital of up to $5,000 to these micro and small businesses. That program, Madam Chair, we will speak to it later on, but Madam Chair, that program has gone extremely well and has benefited. I will leave the details for later on in my presentation, where members of the general manager and the chairman can speak to it. But that program has gone exceptionally well, and we have started to see the benefits. Over 2,000 small businesses and entrepreneurs have accessed that funding. And Madam Chair, we recognize that people with disabilities are indeed persons who can carry on businesses, and they too were not left out. We recognize that the young, they were included, of course, they were not left out. Thank you, member for St. Thomas. We recognize that there was a need to start most of our education within the school system. And Madam Chair, the Financial Literacy Bureau, that is a policy initiative that will be rolled out in the year 2020, 2021 will be started in the schools, whereby the young ones will have access to how to manage their money. Madam Chair, we have also recognized, and I say this figuratively, and I often say to my members, you cannot reach the world through paper. And why I'm saying that, because by the time you try to reach the world through paper as a business, some innovation has already taken place, whether it's in China, it's in the Silicon Valley within the United States, and you're left behind. And in saying that, I want to thank the Ministry of Innovation and Smart Technology, who at every step, as we try to build out the micro, small, and medium enterprise sector, utilizing a digital platform. They have walked the walk with us and talked the talk. And I want to congratulate that ministry. Madam Chair, we recognize that the time has come, in accordance with the World Bank report, the ease of doing business has been a challenge for developing countries. And we are ranked, I think, 94th out of 190 countries. And we set about within our ministry, we have a role to play with respect to the ease of doing business. In the last year and a half, we set about the whole aspect of moving one of the most anachronistic pieces of legislation, the whole liquor license regime. We set about to move it from the magistracy jurisdiction to a commercial jurisdiction within the Ministry of Commerce. Because what is the sale of liquor? It's commerce. And we recognize, Madam Chair, when we did our mapping, and again, thanks to the Ministry of Innovation and Smart Technology, we had over 1,000 liquor licenses sitting, waiting for approval. Over 1,000. What that speaks to? A number of small shops, people who depend on selling liquor to earn a living, to send school their children. They were held up in the system, anachronistic system, outdated system of liquor licensing in this country. And I'm proud to say that the team within the Ministry of Small Business, Entrepreneurship and Commerce, we have reached the stage that we are now with CPC, the Chief Parliamentary Council, where that piece of legislation is just sitting, waiting, well, not sitting, but waiting for the approval from the Attorney General. And I want to thank the stakeholders who participated in the stakeholder consultation. We had some 3 series where we went to the public, and we look at the key stakeholders within the system, and we presented our legislation, and indeed the feedback was wonderful, to the point that we used most of the feedback to come up with modern-day legislation so that we can draft the new Liquor License Act with an effort to repeal the old Liquor License Act that we consider anachronistic. Madam Chair, there are many other initiatives that this ministry would have embarked upon, and I stick with the ease of doing business because we have seen a trend in this country where a number of businesses have filed for bankruptcy, or they have filed for insolvency within the department of the Office of Supervisory of Insolvency. And we recognized there was a need to review legislation and come up with modern-day legislation to assist these businesses. Because one can give the example of Red Jet, who filed for bankruptcy some years ago, and that file was lodged with the Court of Appeal for some years. And indeed, when you file for bankruptcy, you have the debtor say to your, thank you, Madam Chair, I have 2 more minutes. Say to your creditors, I have a challenge paying you. So I file for bankruptcy, and it goes to the court. And we expect some expeditious operations within the court system. And we know what happened within the last 10 years, the last decade. And it turned out, while the trustee who acts on behalf of both the creditors and the debtor to ensure that the creditors get their money back when someone files for bankruptcy, that matter stayed within the court system for such a long time that one of the persons who had to go to the Court of Appeal to indeed to sign off to say, hey, listen, look, this is what we need to do, and I agree with the process, let's pay these creditors. That person died, and as a result, the creditors were unable to get their money back. In addition, Madam Chair, why the Office of Supervisory of Insolvency resides with this ministry, because many small businesses rely on those big businesses for a living daily. And indeed, one of the cases we are reviewing presently, and I won't call the name of the company that has filed for bankruptcy. We will discuss that later. That company has some 58 businesses associated with it, small businesses. And as a result, we can see what will happen to the micro, small, and medium enterprise sector if we don't address the Office of Supervisory of Insolvency as it relates to the Bankruptcy and Insolvency Act, to ensure that we put in place legislation that is modern day and regulations that indeed can withstand the test of time, to ensure that our creditors get their fair share and get their money back. But it's not just all about bankruptcy. When you come to the Office of Supervisory of Insolvency, we want people to know that you come to file proposals to see how best we can save your companies. So the modern day legislation will address that, dealing with debt programs. That is what we are seeking to do, to empower and to keep the micro, small, and medium enterprise sector, businesses and entrepreneurs in that sector alive. So, Madam Chair, I will pause because I recognize you've said to me that the 10 minutes is up. And I want to beg Madam Chair that Head 89 stand par.
Honourable Leader of the Opposition, your remarks.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the Minister for his opening comments, and to his team for being present in support of the Ministry's program as represented in the estimate. So I'll start with comments, go straight to a question or two. Minister, you hail the successes of the Fund Access Micro Enterprise Business program. My query was, when's the program? What can we anticipate?
Madam Chair, could you ask the member for St. Michael West to repeat? I didn't hear him because
I was wondering what the future of the Fund Access program, of which you hailed successes.
Thank you, member for St. Michael West. Through you, Madam Chair. And I will repeat the success thus far for Fund Access and where we are going with Fund Access. And when I'm finished, I will ask the General Manager for Fund Access to take the seat to my left to further, so you can to further explain the role Fund Access plays. Fund Access, I said, started in January 1998 because the government at the time, our government, the member of St. Michael West was part of it, recognized the need to build out the micro enterprise sector. And indeed, Fund Access caters to loans from a range of 10,000 up to 150,000. And to date, I said 1,648 clients, businesses and entrepreneurs would have been empowered through Fund Access. And 791 were new businesses, while 857 were expansions. Madam Chair, when we look into the estimates, the member for St. Michael West he hasn't seen any funding allocated to Fund Access. Fund Access presently is in discussion with the European Investment Bank for funding. And in addition to that, Fund Access will be funded from the dividends from the credit fund. So I'm not sure whether that is where the member for St. Michael West is going. But in addition, as a proof for this period, we have some 139 additional loans and 273 refinance loans. And 2,477 jobs have been created through Fund Access in this country. 2,477 jobs have been created through Fan Access in this country. But I want to say to the chamber that recently,
Just
The
be
top
reminded that
program-
the answer is 3 minutes, regardless of who talks.
I'll pause now, Madam Chair, but I will speak to Fan Access in more detail because they're.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Minister. And that is really the reason for my query.
Thank you.
Because without the successes, and I don't question that, then I don't see any provision in the estimates, and no explanation is advanced. Then I have to ask a question. No need to get stirred. Be calm. I don't need further, I heard the explanation given. We, in due course, we have time to scrutinize that further. Take it easy, Minister. The trust loans program also hails a success in your initial comments. And I believe in the philosophy behind the program. I don't know with any certainty as to implementation, but I do support philosophy behind the program. One thing I would want to query, if the information is available, is with respect to the level of repayment defaults under the trust loans program, and what the ministry is doing about that, if it considers it to be a problem.
Thank you, Member for St. Michael West again. And we started Fan Access, I mentioned to you. We launched on November the 5th, 2018. And I'll give some brief statistics and then answer your question, because I think we have to tell the full story. And indeed, sometimes when you answer the question directly, you don't tell the full story. Fan Access, the trust loans started, I said, in November 4th. We have trained some 1,480 clients thus far in management, financial literacy, customer service, and marketing. Madam Chair, I would want to blow the government's trumpet at this stage. We provided seed capital to small businesses throughout this country, the entire length and breadth of this country. We never prioritized by constituency, because we said once persons had legitimate businesses, then we would provide the seed capital to them. To date, as at the end of February, Madam Chair, Member for St. Michael West, we have disbursed some 2,947 loans to businesses in this country. And I will go further, not to push at you, Member for St. Michael West, but within the first 10 loans disbursed, we had 2 persons from St. Michael West. We have disbursed to 1,500 females and 1,400 males thus far, with a loan value of $13.3 million. If we measure delinquency, how it is measured normally by most financial institutions, we have a 10% delinquency rate. But Madam Chair, we have gone further than that. We want to measure delinquency, and I would let the member, the general manager, speak. We want to measure delinquency based on when you're due for payment and you don't pay on that day, we call that a delinquent person, not in the sense of the person being, but within the financial system. So we are not utilizing the traditional method, because we recognize with the trust loans, it was based on the concept of we trust you, and we trust you to pay, you trust us and we trust you to pay. And there were no requirements for guarantees or guarantors. You just had to register your business and you come. But we never dispersed the loans when you showed up with a legitimate business. We made sure that every single client went through a process of training in management, financial literacy, customer service, and marketing. So part of the $10 million that were given to the trust loan and will be given to the trust loan annually for the next 5 years was used in training. And we utilized those small businesses within the private sector to train the clients, reputable businesses. And I want to congratulate the team at the trust loan and the general manager and also the chairman who brought a level of prudence and good financial management to the trust loan. But I will hand over now, Madam Chair, to the general manager who will speak to us more on delinquency and what are the systems that he has put in place to ensure repayment in accordance with the schedule.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. Good afternoon to members of Parliament. As it relates to the question
Sir, sorry, please introduce yourself.
I'm sorry. Jerry Amos, General Manager of the Barbados Trust Fund Limited. As it relates to the question on delinquency, what, as the Minister alluded to, what we looked at rather than the traditional, conventional way of looking at delinquency, we thought it would be better to look at those who paid versus those who did not pay. The reason for that is that the portfolio is very young. We have just been in existence now for about 18 months, sorry, 14 to 18 months, and the portfolio is really young. And to look at it as traditional, conventional would actually not be fair to those looking on. So what we have done is we've looked at the repayments. We saw that some, when we started, we were actually helping entrepreneurs out there to actually recover because there would have been a period of time where these businesses would have really gone down, and the figures would show that a lot of our applicants were really businesses that were existing already and actually needed a leg up. So we found that if we got those persons to really get the business going, that things would improve. So over a period of time, we've realized that the payments have steadily improved, and in the last 2 months, I must say, our payments per month have doubled actually. So we are really hopeful that going forward that the payments will continue to improve. What we've done, we've put measures in place. We have actually brought on additional persons for compliance to actually reach out to these persons. But we are not only looking out for these persons for payments, we also want to know if there are challenges. So we have our business development team working with our compliance team. In the event that persons who cannot pay, we just don't want to run them down and say you have to pay. We want to find out why they are not paying, and in any way we can help, whether it's through training or using one of our partners to actually try to lift them up. We have also looked at other arms. Rather than persons coming into the trust fund for payment, we have used SurePay and Care Shepherd, so persons can actually go to SurePay and Care Shepherd to make payments. In the last month, the SurePay has really helped us out a lot, and persons are really going there to make their payments. So I must say that the payments have improved significantly in February, and we are very happy with where we're going thus far.
Yes, ma'am. Probably my third question, I think, if I'm counting correctly. If not, I'm sure the Honourable Leader of Government Business will put me on track. Has any study been done, as far as we know, as to the required level of capital for startup business, small enterprise context in Barbados? And if a study, in fact, has been done, what is the volume of capital needed to start businesses, small, medium size, in Barbados? And would the Minister advise his cabinet that perhaps the government can make a radical shift in how small businesses are financed by guaranteeing loans before the traditional banking sector? Some of that $9 billion in liquidity being unused that you talked about.
Member for St. Michael West, we recognize that, and we classify businesses according to, like I said, micro enterprises, small enterprises, and medium. And I will go into a little detail. The micro, less than 5 employees. and annual sales of $500,000 Barbados dollars. And we're looking at investment of 100,000. The small enterprises, less than 30 employees, annual sales of less than 3 million, and investment of $1 million. Medium enterprises, less than 100 employees, and less than 8 million, and investment requiring less than 3 million. Now, when we look at the sector, studies have been done prior, and I will admit that since coming to office, we have not done studies ourselves, but studies were done to inform us as to the amount of capital that we need. That's why when we speak to agencies like the Barbados Stock Exchange, we speak to the Credit Guarantee Fund, we speak to the financial services sector, which is part of government. We recognize that to fully get this sector going, we're only asking for 1%, that what we see as roughly about 90 million, between 50 to 90 million, to cater to the entire sector, the small, micro, and medium enterprise sector. But to say to you that we have done a study, we have relied on work that was done prior, and indeed probably it is timely for us to do one. But let me say to you, the whole aspect of the banking sector, and I don't want to spend the afternoon criticizing the banking sector, but I spoke about the asymmetric information and the high risk associated with this sector, and that is why funding has been tight. And also the need to move those persons from the unbanked to the banking sector. How can we do that? We need to unleash capital. There's no shortage of capital in this country, unlike most developing countries. When you look at what is happening within developing countries, you'll see they have a shortage of capital. We don't have a shortage of capital. What we have within our country, what we have here, we have a number of persons who, as a result of the lack of collateral, they're not being exposed to lending from the banking sector. And we, as a ministry, we are looking at a number of schemes whereby we can unleash capital to this sector, indeed to build up the micro, small, and medium enterprise sector, and to give us our fair share of both social and economic development in this country. Some of the schemes, the Credit Guarantee Fund, which is with the central bank. We have some, I think it's about $80 to $90 million that have been allocated through the IDB, and this funding will be used as guarantee for some of these businesses, up to 80%. We also need to develop something called collateral registry. Gone are the days when banks will only lend to you because you have a house, because you have a piece of land sitting down. We want to create a collateral registry for most of the micro and small businesses. What that means, that's a registry whereby you can have your equipment used as assets, that the bank can not only recognize the land, but they can recognize your equipment, the tools you have. And once we begin to build our sector, those persons who have accessed the trust loans and Fund Access, members from Fund Access would have accessed the credit guarantee scheme through the central bank. So we have a number of tools that were lying dormant for the last decade that we really need to bring back to the fore within the micro, small, and medium enterprise sector. Let's talk about the Innovative Growth Fund, the Barbados Stock Exchange. We need to give our companies the opportunity to be listed on the Barbados Stock Exchange. If we examine Jamaica, which is close to us, you see how the venture capitalists came to the Jamaican economy, and that sector is indeed a very vibrant sector in Jamaica right now. But that was private sector led and not government led. But we have those two tools available, and that is the mandate of this ministry. How do we unleash capital to the micro, small, and medium enterprise sector?
Honourable Member for Christchurch West.
Thank you very much.
Ma'am, yeah, comment, just a response. I think my honorable friend polytrotted a bit around the answer. He gave me some defining characteristics as to how you classify a business as small, micro, or medium, and did not refer to any level of capital considered to be feasible for viable efforts to start and develop an emerging business. And then he did not tell me whether he's bold enough to say to his cabinet colleagues, look, let's stop trying to provide limited funding access windows for these smaller businesses. Let's facilitate these businesses in interfacing with the traditional banking sector at $9 billion. Is he bold enough to tell his cabinet colleagues, let's go that route, rather than government use limited funds to provide small windows? That's the issue.
Member for St. Michael West, I will be lucidly clear to you. And I'm saying to you, and I mentioned the asymmetric information, we don't control the banks. But what we control as a government is policy. And I have said to you, the banking sector, we will create the level of financial literacy that our small businesses and micro businesses will become bankable.
Madam Chair, I am not asking government about controlling the banks, although state machinery can bring some pressure to bear on financial institutions. I am asking about government's control over its own finances, not the banks. Whether or not the government is prepared to put itself in a position that it can help small business people in Barbados to interface with the banking sector by providing some mechanism of guarantee, giving the banks a greater degree of certainty of repayment. That's what I'm talking about.
Madam Chair, I am not sure if the member for St. Michael West heard me. I spoke about the enhanced credit guarantee scheme that is available to the small businesses through the Financial Services Commission and is kept within the central bank and funded by IDB. And the Prime Minister spoke about this in her budget. That is one of the schemes, member for St. Michael West, and that scheme has been provided with some $80 million that is available to the small businesses. And I will allow the General Manager for Fund Access to explain to the Chamber how businesses within Fund Access would have accessed the Enhanced Credit Guarantee Scheme from the Central Bank. And that is one of the government initiatives, policy initiatives. The other one, Madam Chair, you have me calling you Prime Minister, not there yet, right? The whole aspect of the innovation and growth market, which is the Barbados Stock Exchange. When you begin to list companies, their first initial public offering, companies with over 200,000 market capitalization, those are companies we allow investors, once we begin to list companies on the stock exchange. Jamaica did it extremely well, and it was private sector driven. And you allow your investors to take at least some 30% of the investment within the companies. That is indeed one of the initiatives I have listed two that we are looking at as a government. But let me allow the General Manager of Fund Access to give some more details as to how many businesses thus far would have accessed the Enhanced Credit Guarantee Scheme by the government. And that is one of the schemes that the member for St. Michael West is asking about. We believe in creating the enabling environment for our businesses. We believe in creating the enabling environment for our businesses. We don't expect under the program that our government can take up $100 million to put into the micro, small, and medium enterprise sector. But we expect that the policy initiatives will grow this sector. And I will now hand over to the member, the General Manager for Fund Access, who will give us some of the details in terms of how to access the Enhanced Credit Guarantee Scheme through the Central Bank.
Good afternoon, Esther Lord Graham, General Manager of Fund Access. Could you repeat the question, please?
He wants to know what, just explain how businesses have been able to access.
Okay, some businesses from Fund Access have access guarantees through the central bank's credit guarantee scheme. The guarantee scheme ensures 80% of the loan balance. In the event that the person cannot make the repayments, we can claim on the scheme and receive 80% of the outstanding balance. For this, we pay insurance of 1.5% every quarter on the total loans outstanding that are guaranteed by the scheme.
Thank you. Honourable Member for Christchurch West.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And I have a question for the Minister as it relates to consumerism and consumer protection. As you're aware, everyone who goes into a shop, a supermarket, whatever, and buys something is a consumer and relies on the state to protect them with respect to price gouging. We're seeing all the problems with people panicking about the COVID virus and price gouging. And I'm asking, what programs and what policies is your ministry putting in place to protect the consumers in this country?
Member for Christchurch West, indeed you have bowled a curveball, but nonetheless we'll try. The ministry has the responsibility to protect consumers. We have under the Miscellaneous and Controls Act, which deals with imports and goods coming in to the country. And I will start with the last part of the question. We speak about the whole COVID-19. We have an act called Consumers Protection Act. And indeed, that is how we protect our customers. We try to give the customers most of the information. We monitor supermarket prices, and we produce what we call the retail price index or indices on a quarterly basis to look and see how the prices are moving in this country. And indeed, since the reduction of the NSRL, member for Christchurch West, we have seen some reduction in prices, but they have not gone back to the pre-NSRL dates. We intend, though, one of the avenues that we intend to push consumerism is to publish the retail prices on our website. We are not about publishing supermarket names, but we are about giving the customer the choices, because we believe a well-informed customer would do well to enhance its social being and also the economic landscape in this country. Price gouging, Madam Chair and member for Christchurch West, we recognize that under that act, we will look at our regulations to see when we have something like storms and when we have the COVID-19, that we put something in our regulations. We are not going to go after the legislation, the Miscellaneous and Control legislation, because we speak to both the Consumer Protection Act and the Miscellaneous and Control Act. But we will have to put something in the regulation of the Miscellaneous and Control Act to ensure that there's no price gouging in the country, because we removed price control eons ago, and I think the member for St. Michael North, he did a lot of work in that area. I think he sat in the chair that I'm sitting in, and I can't recall the year that we removed price control, but we only have price control on one product, which is petroleum products in this country. All other products we don't have price control on. And in 1997, I think, when we introduced the VAT, that is when we began to police and do our necessary checks with our supermarkets. Thus far, we would like to see more information going to the consumers, and that is one of the avenues through which we will publish the prices. I have to come to Cabinet with that recommendation, And once Cabinet approves that, then we will begin to publish prices and to inform consumers more. But we need a vibrant consumer body. So we will speak to the NGOs and come up with a vibrant consumer body. Right now, we only have probably about 1 or 2 persons who lobby on behalf of the consumer. But our role as a ministry is to ensure that our consumers are treated fairly, whether it is through regulation by the Fair Trading Commission, whether it is through public counsel who deals with any issues less than $10,000 as opposed to going to the law court, or it's through the Department of Commerce and Consumer Affairs through those 2 pieces of legislation that I spoke to you about. But let me allow the acting director of Department of Commerce and Consumer Affairs to give his little speech on the whole aspect of consumerism.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Bertram Johnson, Director Acting, Department of Commerce and Consumer Affairs, members of Parliament, good afternoon. It's remiss to say, first of all, that the Department of Commerce balanced 2 things, the preservation of commerce and also the protection of consumers through the Consumer Protection Guarantees Act. And we, in seeking to do that, as I speak to consumerism, we do that through looking at the retail basket of goods of over 300 products, important. And that started from 1997, when you had the introduction of VAT, and the Department of Commerce, then price control, was charged with the responsibility to monitor prices in Barbados. And to date, we have continued to do that. As the Minister said, to date, we work very closely with the Statistical Department and the Research Unit of the Ministry in compiling data to track the price movements across these 300 baskets, plus those that are captured in the retail index that on the food items that the Department, Barbados Statistical Service, monitor. What I can say today in terms of substance, after the removal of the NRSL, we did some research and we realized that after removal of the NRSL in 2018, we saw some reduction in the price movement of goods. And we continue to track and monitor those movements. I want to say today that the department has again worked with the Stocks Department, and I can give you concrete figures when we look at the retail index across about 11 categories, and those being bread and cereal, meat, fish and seafood, milk and cheese, the oils and fat, fruits, vegetables, food products, coffee, mineral waters. What we saw was that prices in general, if you compare December 2018 to December 2019, we saw a moderation of prices amongst most categories. The ones that we saw vast increases were in the areas of fish and seafood. We saw some in fruits and also in vegetables. And there are some exogenous, I don't mean to use economic terms, but there's some exogenous and endogenous factors that contributed to that. And those endogenous ones were, for example, we had the introduction of moving certain items out of zero-rated to exempted. And I think that was akin to government's policy, particularly in the fruits and vegetable sector, to see more local fruits being produced in Barbados. So you can really say that the policy intent will work, because the increases that you will see would work akin to the feed program of Ministry of Agriculture, which is now pushing for more local production of food and vegetables. And even with the COVID-19, this is also an initiative that would support that. On the exogenous factors, those things that are outside of our control, particularly in the fish and seafood sector, we saw that, for example, the global demand for salmon and tuna, those prices rose tremendously during 2019, and that feed-through effect would have came into the economy. And so forth, we saw increases in things like yellowfish tuna and so forth. You see spikes in those processes. In terms of vegetables, for example, if you are householders, you know, for example, celery and broccoli, we saw particularly sometimes 65% increase in prices globally on those, and those feed-through effects would have affected the retail price index for vegetables. However, what we have sought to do is to continue to work with all stakeholders to make sure that we have a model for sustainable development for agricultural product and fisheries product. So we are working assiduously with the fisheries policy through the cooperatives movement, where we have over 6,000 fisher folks, where once we organize those fisher folks through a cooperative model, we can see that redounding into a better management of the fisheries policy. And I know the Minister of Maritime Affairs is here, But the department or the ministry, I would want to say, is working seamlessly with that agency. On the agriculture front, as I said earlier, we're working with the feed program and we're feeding input into that analysis. So if there are any further questions, I don't want to take up all, but those are some key interventions. But the last one I want to say that had redone, and this will be the last one at this point, that the soft policy, where we had, led by the minister, meeting with a number of distributors and supermarkets. We saw those interventions leading to what we call a holding of prices in the supermarkets and gas stations and other distributors set to join this period. And why I want to say that one of the successes of that intervention was a broadening of commerce. You will see in the supermarkets and particular gas stations a more uptake of a lot of local products. And I want to speak specifically to bottled water. You will see a lot of local bottled water being sold now in having more shelf space. So the interventions, again, is helping to reduce foreign exchange in certain sectors, but also even in the prices within the market. So thank you for your indulgence. Much obliged.
Thank you very much. Very concise and precise answer. I want to turn to something that the minister spoke about with respect to the unbankable people in our society. He did mention it, and I wonder if you would be able to expand on what programs and policies your ministry is putting in place to be able to help these unbankable people.
Thank you again, the member for Christchurch West. You're bowling some curveballs at me. Let me take you back to something that occurred in Kenya in 2007. The Kenyan government had immense poverty within Kenya, and in 2007, the Kenyan government partnered with one of the largest telecom giants in the world, Safaricom, to launch something by the name of M-Pesa, which is a digital money payment system. This was in 2007. And what that did for Kenya, reduced poverty within Kenya. And we can research it as I speak. Those who are listening can go on and Google Kenyan M-Pesa. And persons were able to pay with taxis, pay for taxi rides, taxi fare using their telephones as a result of the breakthrough with Safaricom and the Kenyan government. We're at a stage where we recognize the importance of digitizing, and as a result, the formation of the Ministry of Innovation and Smart Technology. We have to come up with payment solutions that are non-cash. What that does for most of these small businesses, like Kenya, those persons who never had a credit rating, and I will get back to the trust loan with that, those persons were able to use their telephones based on the money payment system and pay for items, pay for services, pay for goods. And that is one of the revolutionary small business initiatives within the African country. And we recognize here as a small developing country, we have to push and digitize payment. That will enhance credit rating for those unbankable persons, because you will be paying with your card for services, and indeed, with your phone, with your card for services. And you move from the unbanked stage when you create that credit profile to the bankable stage. In addition, Madam Chair, the role of the trust loan is to do just that for our people. If we extrapolate that after 1 year, we have some 4,000 persons, we only spoke about the 2,964, let me say 3,000 persons after 1 year who have passed through the trust loans. Let's extrapolate that to the next 3 years or the next 5 years, because to the next 8 years when we are in office, you will see how much persons we can empower in terms of enhancing their credit rating. So the asymmetric information that I spoke about earlier and the high risk associated with the micro and small businesses and the entrepreneurs would be a thing of the past. Some may mention the whole 2% foreign exchange. I will go there because the honorable member for St. Michael West, I know he might come back to raise that as an issue, as a concern. But we came to office, and I have here the chairman of the trust loans who can speak to that, you know, clearer than I can. But we came to office and we found that persons are saying that small businesses have been disadvantaged. But once we create digital payment solutions and we utilize that ICT platform, I have a saying, you can't reach the world through paper, and I often say to my team, we will indeed allow those persons who are unbankable to become bankable. So once you create all these digital payment solutions, you will reduce your transaction costs. So you will find that indeed buying things online become more economical or less expensive, and that 2%, which will be a short-lived revenue generation, we are still in the BERT program, and of course we have to generate revenue. So I say to the small businesses, let's focus, and the government has the wherewithal, and we have been doing it to create the digital payment solutions, and that is one of the items on the trust loan and finance agenda for the year 2020-21, to come up with payment solutions. And I urge the telecom companies to provide their platform, so when we break through with some innovation in terms of a payment solution, the cost of doing business and the cost of transacting business within the micro, small, and medium enterprise sector becomes a lot lower. I don't know if I have answered you, or if you want me to go into more detail with the stock exchange and the peer-to-peer lending. I don't know if I've
Yes,
done
Minister,
enough.
I think you've answered very pellucidly clear, as you would have said. My final question has to do with the banking sector. You know, I hold no brief for the banks, and that is clear, and they are aware, and we are all aware. My brief is for the people of Barbados, and by extension, the people of Christchurch West. And what we've seen over the years is a change in the business model from banks. Years ago, banks used to make money based on loans, and they would charge an interest, and based on that interest, they would make a profit and have that money to be able to lend it to others and make those profits. What has happened over the years, they've become so risk averse and have stopped making those loans that we would expect them to make, and instead they make money based on fees. And those fees and the way that they charge those fees is essentially unregulated. And I'm wondering, in your ministry, what ideas or concepts do you have with respect to regulating how banks charge fees in this country? I recognize that at the central bank, they've had some discussions about the banks and their fees. But essentially, it appears to me that there's unregulated. So what ideas and what programs and what policies is your ministry looking at with respect to the banking sector, and how that business model has changed to be able to make money on fees rather than make money on loans?
Minister, again, I said you're really bowling some curveballs. I'm not sure.
That's what I'm here to do,
Yeah.
Minister.
Thank you,
I'm not
thank
here
you.
to ask you easy questions.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. I'm not sure if it falls within our remit or within the remit of the Ministry of Finance, but I will attempt to answer, and thereafter I will allow the chairman of the trust loan, Dr. Clyde Maskell, to come in, because he's more competent than I am to deal with these matters. Your point is absolutely correct in terms of the amount of money lying in the banking sector, and you're putting your money into a bank, and you are earning what, 0.1% interest on it. Recently, I saw a small business person, who, for some reason or the other, a check was returned from the bank, and the check was not more than $3,000, and that person had to pay a fee of $200 to the bank. I won't call the bank name, but the role of the bank, and I understand, I'm not sure whether we can regulate the banking sector. I would allow the chairman to speak. But what this ministry will do, and I am charged with the responsibility to, number one, make the Barbadian public, starting with the schools, more financially literate in terms of the Financial Literacy Bureau, whereby they will know how to manage the money, they will understand debt management, credit cards, why not to have such high credit cards. We will start within the school system. I sent my son at age 12 to a credit union summer camp, and he was doing modeling with trading on the stock exchange at age 12. These are some of the things we need to do within our school system, and I know the Minister of Education, the member for St. Michael Southeast, she is listening to me, but we have not yet gone to her with this proposal, and it has to go to cabinet. So whereas I would like 1% of the $9 billion sitting down in the banking sector, and to ask the bank to ease the fees publicly for the micro, small, and medium enterprise sector, and to do a similar thing to what the trust loan is doing. Trust your people. Help build that financial literacy element where the asymmetric information becomes more symmetric, whereby the risk then and your interest rates will be lower. Because for the banks, they're going out and doing research on the small business having a high transaction cost associated with it. So that's why the cost of the interest cost goes up. But we as a government and as a ministry, we are charged with educating our people to help them make better financial decisions. We are also charged with coming up with other policy initiatives, driving our digital payment systems that would allow our people to enhance their credit rating and their credit profile. But in terms of regulating the banks, member for St. Michael West and the Chamber, I'm not sure that falls within the remit of my ministry, so I will hand over now to the chairman of the trust loan, Clyde Maskell, who will go more in depth into the whole aspect of regulation of the banking sector.
Good afternoon. I'm Clyde Maskell, whoever he is. I'm not sure who he is. But, over the last 10 years, the most fundamental factor or issue in the economy was stifled. It is called disposable income. People did not in any way receive salary increases that I can recall, but they encouraged higher taxation, meaning that they had less disposable income. The average individual either spends or consumes out of disposable income, or he saves. The problem is that when you have to consume more than you're saving, it is highly unlikely that you're going to have an appetite for borrowing money. And therefore, in that environment where the government was requiring money to be shifted to them to finance the extraordinary deficits that they had, we had some pressure being put on the system, the entire banking system. The banking system was then seduced into placing more money with the government. And as a quid pro quo, the banking system was permitted to fix its own deposit rates, and as a consequence, lowered the deposit rates substantially, thus discouraging people from wanting to save. But since we do not save only for speculative reasons, we save for precautionary reasons, we save for transactionary reasons, you will still see a buildup of money in the system. As a result of people not borrowing because of the circumstances, the banks found other ways to make money, and they went the route of transaction costs. Every little thing you did in the banking system, you then paid. Overall, therefore, we had a situation in which the member for Christchurch West is right. Because there was a dampening of demand for loans, the commercial banks found ways to make money and put pressure on the public as a whole. In this environment, though, we're not about doing excessive things in order to regulate, because you end up not getting what you want from an economic system when you over-regulate the system. Consequentially, we are in a position, therefore, where we have to look, and I think recently we heard the governor of the central bank delivering a speech on how they need to address these additional costs being put on depositors in the commercial banks. And I think we need to allow this to play out. The other thing, though, that is interesting is that at this stage, the government itself is not requiring to borrow from commercial banks or any other institutions the way it did before. And herein lies the opportunity for us as a country then to make available, when the time comes, resources to those disadvantaged. But having said that, this administration has now added the trust loans, but prior to that, there was fund access, and along with that, there was the Enterprise Growth Fund. So in 3 different institutions, the government has played its part to deal with the whole question of the imperfections in the system, where you're not guaranteed a loan, even if you qualify for it. And we have, therefore, to be careful in believing that we can then decide to force the hand of the commercial banks in this country. However, it is fair to say that the government, having gone the route that has gone in offering all kinds of Barbadians access to finance, whether it is $5,000 or less at the trust fund, or $150,000 or less at fund access, or more than $150 at the Enterprise Growth Fund, that the government itself has played a major role in making such funds available. So there's no need for excessive regulation at this stage. There's need now for us to make sure that an environment is created that creates the kind of growth that we need in this country. And that will come, and I can swear on that, by June to January of this year, because there has to be a transfer of income to the lower end of the economy, and that is best done in a sustainable way through growth and through job creation. Other than that, there's no one in the hearing of my voice, or no one looking at me, who could deny that the transformation that has occurred in 20 months is as close to a miracle, a financial, economic miracle, as you could have anticipated in this country.
Honourable member for St. Michael South.
Sorry, Madam Chair. My question was asked by the member for Christchurch West.
Okay.
So I'll pass on. Thank you.
That's all right. Honourable member for St. James South.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I want to start by congratulating the ministry for the work of the trust loans. The trust loans, for me, has done a lot for people in my constituency. People who have not been working for a long time, people looking around for something to do to earn income to take care of their families. And therefore, the trust loans has made a lot of difference to people in my constituency. And I was particularly pleased when Mr. Amos also spoke about the fact that when people were not able to make a payment, that a sledgehammer was not used in dealing with them. But you bring them in, you talk with them, you find out what is the problem, and you help them to come out of it. So I want to express appreciation for that, because people really, really need that. Now, one of the things, a question I wanted to ask the minister, I remember that he had done a presentation about bringing together a whole set of agencies who deal with the small business group, and you brought them together under one umbrella to enhance cooperation and enhance the services to the small business sector. I consider that to be an extremely important instrument. I just wondered if you could share about that particular agency and what are the expected outcomes, what are the things you anticipate they will be able to do in aiding small businesses to be able to do well within the economy.
Member for St. James South, I want to thank you for the question. We recognize that the last decade, or somebody said the last decade, or I would say the last decade, and could be the last decade. It's probably the last decade, but you know, I like to move forward and focus on what we as a government, what we are going to do and what we have been doing since 2018. We recognize that the micro, small, and medium enterprise sector, you had a number of players doing many things. And the fact that there was no focus from government in terms of creating that entrepreneurial and that ethos that we require to build the sector, we find a fragmented set of players tumbling on each other. So when we came to office, even though the Small Business Development Center, which is an operational framework that you're speaking about, that was developed, a memorandum of understanding was signed between the United States, the Organization of American States, and this government last year. I think it was in the month of November. And when we signed that memorandum of understanding, that was with a view to adopt the Small Business Development Center network. That is the operational framework used by the United States to bring all of the small business agencies under one umbrella. So the cohesiveness that is needed within the sector was indeed achieved. So we have BIDC, Barbados Investment Development Corporation, Youth Entrepreneurship Scheme, we have the Small Business Association, we have Fund Access, then we have Barbados Youth Business Trust, which focuses on at-risk youth. And the member for Christchurch West Central, during his presentation, one of his members spoke about that. We also have the Barbados Trust Fund Limited. And last but by no means least, the new addition to the network was the Samuel Jackman Prescott Institution. So we now have all of the agencies under one umbrella. And what is critical to this umbrella is this whole near zero database that we have, whereby we are capturing information on how these businesses are doing. So one of the requirements of all of the agencies under the Small Business Development Center network, they have to input data on all of the businesses that they're indeed trying to build out that pass through their institutions. For instance, BIDC, Barbados Investment Development Corporation, deals with the export arm, They provide business development services. So when businesses have shown that they are ready to take on the world and that the 166 square miles is, that's not their home alone, then they go to BIDC. And what is captured within this near zero database, and I have an example here. I won't make it a document of the house, but we are looking at job creation, job retention, business started, business expanded, persons trained, loan, values of the loan, finance provided, number of business accessing whatever services there are, new investment, and we are measuring it. So at the end of the day, under that umbrella body, we're able to measure the impact of the micro, small, and medium enterprise sector to both social and economic development in this country. I will pause at this time because behind every minister, and this ministry has a number of persons who have worked tirelessly, arduously, put in the work day in, day out. And I have to my right Mr. Anderson Cumberbatch, who has spearheaded the whole policy initiative, and he will go more in depth into that. But to answer you, member for St. James South, we have now rescued the micro, small, and medium enterprise sector from the last decade, and we are now measuring the impact of the micro, small, and medium enterprise sector to Barbados' economic development and also the social aspect. Because within most of these frameworks, we have to deal with poverty. So don't underestimate the role that the trust loan is playing. Up to $5,000. Those persons, some persons don't want to go overseas. Some persons with these businesses, they just want to provide for their family. They wanted to make sure that they have their rightful place in Barbados' economic and social development. So over to Mr. Anderson Cummins, who's the business advisor, Anderson Cumberbatch, sorry, who's the business advisor within the ministry.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of Parliament. As the Minister said, my name is Anderson Cumberbatch, and I'm the Chief Business Development Advisor. With respect to the Small Business Development Center, it's basically a model that was adopted from the U.S. It's the way how the U.S. do small business development, and it has been adapted to the Barbados scenario. As Minister indicated, the network consists of persons from the BIDC, the Youth Entrepreneurship Scheme, the Small Business Association Fund Access, Barbados Youth Business Trust, Barbados Trust Fund Limited, and we're hoping to bring in our cooperatives department so that we capture all of those small business agencies. In relation to what the model seeks to do, the model is really a collaborative model where we are having the government working with the private sector and academia to help small businesses in Barbados. So the university plays a critical role in this model. Basically, if we're going to build out the sector, we have to have empirical data. We have to have research capacity and capability. And therefore, the university, along with the Summer Jumper Press Institute, will be playing a critical role in this model. As the Minister would have indicated before, there are many challenges within the sector. And this framework where we collaborate, it therefore helps to mitigate a number of issues. Over the years, there have been a lot of duplication within the system. Persons have operated as separate silos, and this has created a lot of challenges. So the model seeks to pull all of these players together. Question was asked previously about the small businesses being unbankable. We are therefore seeing that with the training that is being involved in this model, we can help to mitigate some of those issues where then, through training, the small businesses can become bankable. As I think most of us would have known that for many of the small businesses, the owners want to be the accountants, they want to be the economists, they want to be everything within the small business, except doing what they're supposed to be doing. So the model therefore allows for the agencies to provide the type of business development services and hand-holding to these businesses so that the businesses do what they are supposed to do so that they're better able to, as it were, to become economically viable, and so on and so on. So the SBDC model, and I have some statistics here which would be interesting. We would have created over 2,900 jobs within the model. And the last one I would want to bring, there are a whole number of statistics. We would have linked out. This is for 2019 because the manager from the Fund Access would have given her some statistics before. But for 2019 alone, we would have trained over 2,000 persons. So I'm saying that the model is working, and as far as we are concerned, it is the way to go in terms of business development. We can no longer operate as separate silos. That model is long gone, and we must collaborate.
Let me apologize to the University of the West Indies because key within the SBDC framework, when we are talking about innovation, I think the university, we have to, and I apologize for omitting the University of the West Indies because they are critical, they're a key member of the SBDC network. So my apology.
Thank you very much. It is a very powerful model, I think, that can help deliver better service to our small businesses. You touched on another area that I had here as a question, and that's the issue of cooperatives. Cooperatives have been a challenge in our environment. It is a good model to help people work together and leverage their numbers to be able to achieve more. One of the challenges, I remember when I was at the SBA, we had started looking at the cooperative, but when we went and asked about what was needed to be done, the requirements were so much. We felt a little overwhelmed by it. I don't know if since then there have been changes to the cooperative model or if there have been, for example, additional supports maybe put in place that makes it easier for people to sort of work together in cooperatives so that we can build some scale and grow our businesses.
Thank you, Member for St. James South. Madam Chair, when I speak to the cooperatives, I get goose pimples. And if you would allow me to, a few minutes to get into the role of the cooperatives. Member for Christchurch East. I grew up in a rural village called Ellerton St. George. My grandfather was the co-founder of the credit union movement in Ellerton St. George. And I recall him with, some say 13 children, I say 12. And he was able to put bread on the table for his children. Some migrated to the US to earn a living, and they raised other children, who then turn around and raise other children. So I'm speaking about intergenerational, not wealth when it comes to the Sutherland family, but intergenerational existence. You speak to wealth when it comes to other families. We are a poor Bajan family from a rural village. And I recall as a little boy walking with him to the primary school in the Almina Amy block, which is now Ellerton Primary School, and carrying those books. But I'm saying that to say that the role of the cooperatives give the average man, working class families, a hand up. The ability to save money and to put food on their table. Again, we are back to the days because we have lost a decade and some years. And since we came to office, as a government, we have formed some 6 cooperatives. We are not talking about the financial cooperatives, which is the credit union movement, because we have separated the financial to the non-financial. I'm speaking to the non-financial, which are the Barbados Association of Courts Owners, the Ross University. And if you research the Ross University, when we came to office, we recognized, and the Minister of Education, Member for St. Michael Southeast, is shaking her head, because we took the average man, those persons who were driving a bus, some didn't own a bus, and they were able to come together. Some 30-odd coach owners, they became coach owners, and that has generated within this country some $3.3 million annually, US I'm talking about, all right? So we have pushed cooperative movement because we recognize that individuals must be able to work together to pool the resources and achieve economies of scale. we didn't stop there. Recently, we formed cooperatives of artisans and builders association, and that was formed at the end of 2019. These builders, in our manifesto, we articulated as a government, and we continue to promulgate that these small contractors must have their fair share of work in this country. So that procurement now, 25% or anything under 200,000 must go to these guys. But individually, these guys can be classified as unbankable. But when they pool their resources together, then they can leverage their assets to become bankable. And this is a model that this government has pushed. Recently, the United Transporters Cooperative Society Limited, we believe in enfranchising and empowering our working class people. The transport board workers, the bus drivers, again 30-something bus drivers, came to our ministry thanks to the member for St. Michael West, for Christchurch West, and the member for St. Lucie. We work closely as two ministries, interministerial collaboration, to ensure that that cooperative was formed. And there's no greater model than the cooperative model to ensure empowerment and enfranchisement of our working class people. And today, those coach owners, we didn't only form the cooperative, but we provided funding to the tune of $2.5 million through fund access for those bus drivers to access the funding. And I want to thank the Barbados Workers Union, because we worked with the union to make sure the Transport Board, the union, fund access, and the main ministry, we worked together to make sure that the enfranchisement model that we spoke about in our manifesto became a reality. And today, I can say that we have disbursed more than 50% of those average working class people like myself, black people in this country, who believe and who know that the time has come for them to take their rightful place in the economic landscape of this country. And we have empowered them by providing loans and by the formation of a cooperative. So I can go on further, Madam Chair, and when I speak to cooperative, I get passionate, because that is how I was financed through university and through secondary school, from a cooperative. We also formed the Cooperative Society Investment Fund, so that these cooperatives, they have a place to go to access funding, and that fund was formed registered in August 2018. So when you sit and look at this government's track record in trying to build the micro, small, and medium enterprise sector, I don't think no other government since slavery can compare with what we have done as a government to build this key sector. I thank you.
You have 2 minutes. You already killed 5 minutes.
Brent Gittins, Registrar of Cooperatives, Madam Chair, and other members of Parliament. I too am very passionate about the cooperative movement, and I think that we at the Cooperatives Department believe that we are to help to build out the Barbadian economy, and a cooperative that I'm very passionate about, that is soon to be formed, will be the Barbados Sustainable Energy Cooperative Society Limited. And this cooperative is a cooperative that will enfranchise Barbadians and give them local ownership and participation in the renewable energy sector. It is in line with the government's policy to move away from fossil fuel usage by the year 2030, and we believe it will create a sound platform through which an energy co-op can thrive, as well as empower and enfranchise Barbadians. Sometime in August last year, we were approached by the Ministry of Energy and Water Resources to look at the cooperative model with respect to forming this cooperative, And it fits very well into the cooperative principles and values of solidarity, equality, democracy, and one member, one vote. So we think that it is great business facilitation to form these cooperatives that will create wealth and also intergenerational wealth for Barbadians. And I would say it is much easier to form cooperatives now. You approach our department, we have a meeting with you, we will give you a concept paper that will help to guide you with your business plan. We will give you a model set of bylaws, and then we will also help you shape your bylaws. And then when you think you're ready, you come back to us, and once we go through your bylaws and your business plan, we will register you as a cooperative as long as everything is okay.
Thank you very much. And the last question goes back to the issue of the ease of doing business. I believe your ministry is responsible within the wider grouping that is looking at the ease of doing business. You've been tasked with a number of things. I believe in your presentation you had shared about the issue of the liquor licenses, which is to help people, especially in crop over and entertainers, people who want to make some quick money, help make that easier. But I believe there are other things that you do under the ease of doing business, which is to help Barbados be able to be attractive as a place for investment, attractive and a place for locals to be comfortable doing business in this space. So I don't know if you have other things that you're doing, and if you could update us on your progress.
Certainly, and the member for St. James, if there's one minister in this chamber for St. James South that is versed in small business, and I want to take this time and this moment to thank you for the support you have provided to me as a minister and also to my ministry. Right? The ease of doing business, and I mentioned the World Bank report. I think this is the 2018 or 2019 report, whereby we were ranked 94th out of 190 countries. And two of the areas that we are charged with in terms of improving the ease of doing business, other than the liquor license regime, are facilitating trade and also how well we resolve insolvency and bankruptcy. They're listed in the whole aspect of insolvency and bankruptcy is listed in the World Bank report. We were 34th out of the 190 countries. We dropped 1 to 35th. So you see how critical resolving insolvencies and bankruptcies are. Investors look at a country to gauge the investment climate, and indeed that is one of the areas that we have been pushing in terms of making sure how fast we resolve these matters. And I'm going to ask shortly the supervisor of insolvency to take the place to my right, and thereafter her, I will ask the chief economist, who has the lead responsibility for trade facilitation, to take the chair after, so she can explain how we have been preparing for the electronic single window, which is also listed as one of the areas that the World Bank measure in terms of trade facilitation for us to implement. So I'll ask the Officer for Supervisory Insolvency to come and shed some light on what we are doing to ensure that we go back, if not to 34th, but below, so that we can have a very good rating in terms of resolving insolvency and bankruptcy. Over to.
Good evening, through you, Chair. Esther Springer, Supervisor of Insolvency. Our office began in 2018 to conduct stakeholder consultations for the purpose of determining how well our insolvency regime was functioning. Following feedback, we recognized that we had to update the existing legislation. So we had to update the existing legislation to ensure that it aligns with international best practice. We also recognize that part of the problem with the current regime is the actual business processes. So while the Act, there are certain areas that we intend to improve, to strengthen, to allow small businesses to access post-commencement financing, allowing individuals to make proposals to creditors. We also recognize that the challenge in terms of the delay in resolving these matters lay in the actual business processes. We're currently doing the Barbados Insolvency Law Project, which will allow us to basically, again, engage with our stakeholders to see what issues that they're having. We recognize that part of the issues, the challenges we had were with other agencies under another ministry's portfolio. We are currently working with them to map the business processes and look to see how we can improve. One of the challenges, of course, as the minister would have spoken to earlier, was the delays in the court system. We recognize now with the implementation of a commercial court, we should see some improvement. We're already starting to see the treatment. The area is not one that is considered to be very attractive, but it is very important. The insolvency of one individual or one company can actually trigger the insolvency of another, so that if we do not address the particular challenges, it can have implications for the economy. So we're working to strengthen not only the legal framework, but the operational framework that underpins. And we believe that in doing so, we should see a vast improvement, notwithstanding that we dropped one in the rankings in the last assessment. Our scores actually improved. So we recognize that we would have had the Barbados Reform Note, where the World Bank would have spoken to some areas where we can improve. We are also looking to improve those as well, so that we can improve our ranking in the area of resolving insolvency.
Let me just add, we have found, coming to the ministry, and I will let Ms. Springer speak further on it, we found a number of small businesses coming in to file for bankruptcy. And some are even sole practitioners. But what the program speaks to is the whole aspect of dealing with debt. And I will want her to expand on the dealing with debt program. And the Office of Supervisory of Insolvency is not just about bankruptcy and insolvency. We see our primary focus as saving businesses in this country. Gone are the days when you come to the ministry when you're bankrupt. You come to the ministry and you say to us, we're having challenges paying our creditors. Then we would appoint some of the accountants, and I want at this stage to thank those accountants who have volunteered their services to address some of the small businesses in terms of dealing with that. And once we carry on this program, we can see a number of our businesses remaining as going concerns in this country. But I will let her get into the details, Mrs. Springer, on the dealing with that program, because I think it is worthwhile to explain to the public and the small businesses. You don't only come to us when your head is down or when it's too late. Thank you, Member for Christchurch East.
In 2019, our department would have launched the Dealing with Debt program, and it actually was a program birthed out of necessity. What we were finding is that we were having it started off to deal specifically with individuals. We were having a number of individuals coming who wanted to file for bankruptcy. But as we did an assessment of their finances, we recognized it wasn't necessarily that they needed to file for bankruptcy. What they really needed was someone to help them to do debt restructuring, debt counseling. What we did, we reached out to our licensed trustees and some accountants, and they very graciously offered to assist. It is a volunteer program right now, and in exchange, we will provide the logistical support in terms of making sure they fill out the templates, we go through the counseling, we set up the meetings with the accountants, who then will go through with those individuals. During the latter part of the year, then, as the program became to be known, we had a number of sole proprietors and persons registered under the Registration of Business Names Act. They would have approached us as well. At first, they started on the premise that they needed to file for bankruptcy, but then in doing the assessment, we recognized that they were not necessarily at that stage, but really needed accounting assistance and debt restructuring and debt counseling. So part of the program, you have to go through mandatory financial counseling, and we're so happy that the financial literacy bureaus coming on, because then we would have a partner to whom we can refer these matters, because we don't have all of that skill set in-house, and it will take some of the burden off of the accountants who are giving their services currently voluntarily. The program is aimed at restoring our people to a state of solvency, and not necessarily, where we see that the business is still viable, then they will qualify for the program. It is only in the circumstance where we recognize that it is at its life end, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, because in the market we need to be able to ensure that persons don't continue to trade while insolvent. As I said, the insolvency of one can trigger the insolvency of another.
The other program is the electronic single window, an initiative, and I would ask the Chief Economist, Mrs. Katrina Bradshaw, to share the whole trade facilitation experience and what we are doing in the ministry in terms of to improve the ease of doing business with the Chamber.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of Parliament. Good evening. My name is Katrina Bradshaw, Chief Economist in the Ministry. And I will just emphasize, as our Minister indicated, that one of our mandates is to facilitate trade and business facilitation, a very matter that is very close and dear to our hearts. We have a National Steering Committee, which is chaired by the Ministry, that has responsibility for overseeing trade reforms. And we would have been robustly engaged in a lot of discussion and plans as it relates to how we can advance and improve our ranking as a country as it relates to facilitating the ease of doing business. And out of that process, we would have devised a roadmap in 2019 to the period 2023, as well as devised and identified a number of areas where we need technical assistance. And we look forward to coming this financial year to be working closely with key stakeholders, as well as the Ministries of Finance and the Division of Economic Affairs in making some progress in these areas. One of the key areas that we have identified would be the need to facilitate and improve trade at our borders, and we're looking to launch an electronic single window platform, which will facilitate, provide a single window where importers can supply or apply for license permits or certificates within a single window environment, and have that process by the government agencies involved. So we're making a one-stop window to ease and facilitate business in this area. So we're looking forward to having this initiative coming to Cabinet shortly.
Thank you. Honourable Member for St. James North.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Minister, I commend you and your ministry, your team, for the progress you have made in the development of small business so far in such a short space of time. The trust loans, of course, has been truly amazing. The figures you quoted, almost 2,500 new jobs, the progress you have made in terms of developing small business. And of course, we're in a situation where when, as you implied, the Honourable member who now sits as representative for St. James South was president of the Small Business Association. I believe they had about 16,000 businesses registered as small businesses in Barbados. That declined to probably about 10,000 in the last decade. And your mandate, of course, is to build that back up, considering, of course, that small business is the lifeblood and energy of commerce in a society. And commend you as well in terms of the procurement legislation to give incentives and priority for community groups and organizations and persons with disabilities to gain access to government contracts of $250,000 or less. That is commendable. Direct removal, essentially, of the policy of the last government to place contracts, government contracts, in the hands of a handful or less of people of big capital in Barbados, and a commitment to this government's policy to enfranchise people who have been traditionally disadvantaged from the commercial sector in Barbados. And we will all support you. Your mandate, of course, revolves around many ministries, whether it's education, home affairs, international business, etc. But I want to give you the opportunity, Honourable Member, to speak in terms of the Consumer Claims Tribunal and the progress that has been made in that regard under your ministerial mandate so far. Consumer Claims Tribunal, of course, being a legacy of the Honourable Member for St. Michael North when he was Minister in his first calling under the last Barbados Labour Party administration, bringing in a whole suite of consumer legislation, and he will stand out, of course, if for nothing else, because of that legacy. And I of course, had the privilege to sit on the Consumer Claims Tribunal, the first one that they ever had for 6 years. And just to allow you, Minister, the opportunity to give a report on Consumer Claims Tribunal.
Thank you, Member for St. James North. The Office of Public Counsel, that office is responsible for dealing with claims of less than $10,000. Any claim as it relates to businesses, whether sole proprietor or otherwise. So we don't go to the law court. We basically have a tribunal. The tribunal is made up of 5 persons. And when we came to office, and I guess the Honourable Member, in talking to him, and I guess he wants me to let the public know, and I want to thank you for raising it so that it's not lost. I will ask Mr. Leach to come forward when I'm finished to discuss some of the challenges. But we came to office in 2018. We found a backlog of cases, over 300. And I'm proud to report that we cleared that backlog within a year and a half. And I want to congratulate the tribunal, which is headed by QC Fiona Hines and her team, and also the staff of Public Counsel. Mr. Roger Barker, who has now moved on, who is the head of Public Counsel, is now within the Attorney General Chambers. And we have a new head of the Public Counsel, which is Mr. Blackman, who's here with us. But in all fairness, Mr. Blackman is only 3 weeks on the job, so I wouldn't put Mr. Blackman on the spot. But we have a challenge with enforcement in that we have some sole practitioners and some businesses. You know, it is a saying that they're trying to say that the tribunal has no teeth, in that when you send a summons out to these young persons or these business persons, don't let me use young because they are of all ages, you know, they would frown upon the summons issued by the tribunal. And within the legislation, I think the registrar and also the marshals currently, they're the ones issuing the summons. But here to say, we have been meeting weekly to resolve the issues. We know we have a challenge in terms of enforcement, but I have seen a tremendous improvement in the Office of Public Counsel as it relates to the function of the tribunal. And I would want to, again, to congratulate them and to say to the businesses, you know, when a summons reaches you as a business person, you know, we would like you to come and sit down with the tribunal. It's not a punitive tribunal. We look at ways in which we can resolve matters amicably without going to the law courts. And that's the whole business, because we recognize that small businesses have challenges. Someone may sell some windows and give some specs of some windows, and when the person purchased the windows, they realize that the windows are not what they would have originally been quoted or not what they purchased. Those matters will come to the tribunal. And indeed, we would like the small businesses, and I'm appealing to you, when you get a summons, it's not a summons to go to jail, it's a summons to come and sit with the tribunal and the Office of Public Counsel to get the matter resolved amicably. But I will hand over to Mr. Leach and allow Mr. Leach, who is one of the senior officers within the Office of Public Counsel, to go through some of the challenges and what we're doing to address some of these challenges.
Good afternoon, members of Parliament, Madam Chair. Paul Leach, Investigations Officer, Office of Public Counsel. Just to add to what the Minister would have shared, the office has indeed, in fact, been able to reduce a serious backlog that would have existed, and I would not go into the reasons why that backlog would have come into play. Suffice to say that for quite some time, the office was without a full staff complement. We are now up to full staff complement, and we have been able to reduce that backlog, putting that full staff complement to effective use. One of the biggest challenges that we are facing right now is that the public is not fully aware of the role and function of the Office of Public Counsel. As the Minister would have said, while it sits as a tribunal having the powers of a magistrate's court within the civil jurisdiction, the Office of Public Counsel is not a punitive agency. We work hand in hand with the Consumer Claims Tribunal, and matters will only go to the tribunal when they have not been able, when we in the Office of Public Counsel have not been able to negotiate a settlement. So, as the Minister said, we are not punitive, but we are here to facilitate a smooth interaction between consumers and suppliers as it relates to the purchase of goods and services. Having said that, what I would want to say is that going forward, we want to build out that relationship between the Office of Public Counsel and the wider business community. And we speak to the ease of doing business in Barbados. We want it to be a situation where consumers feel safe within the confines of transacting business. And within the context that we are speaking of, we're not only looking at local consumers, but we're looking at consumers from the region, and as tourism plays a vital part in the development of our economy, we also want to look at the wider world so that persons coming from overseas to spend holidays in Barbados are comfortable and secure in the knowledge that there is a level playing field, a fair playing field in Barbados for consumers, and they can buy their goods and services without having any fears of any ill effects of that interaction.
Thank you. Minister, we want to address the issue of the vending policy of the government, of your ministry, and of course, decriminalization of vending is a major issue of the Cabinet of Barbados. We know that criminalization of vending was used by colonial parliament of this country to essentially hinder and obstruct development of black people in this country. And giving you the opportunity, Honourable Member, to speak towards the initiatives that are being established and you know, to move towards legislation in terms of decriminalization of vending, and as to whether there has been agreement in principle to expunge the records of those persons who have been convicted in the past for vending.
Thank you, Member for St. James North. Madam Chair, the member spoke to vending, and I would want to use the word vending has been highly stigmatized in this country. The stigma attached to vending dates back from slavery. And if we do our research, back in the 1600s, the history of the slavery and the struggles of black people on the plantation to be enfranchised, those working class women, and I want to pause at this time to recognize Women's International Day, which was celebrated yesterday, to the women in this chamber and to the women in the constituencies and around Barbados. Because vending started with women. Those women who back in the 1600s, you know, took the produce from the plantation and they sold it to earn a living, and all legislation from the plantocracy days sought to make it a criminal offense. And we are now looking at outdated legislation. Where vending is addressed is in the Market and Slaughterhouse Act, which is managed primarily by the Ministry of Agriculture. And we are now charged as a Ministry of Small Business, Entrepreneurship and Commerce to come up with a comprehensive vending policy that speaks to vending in a modern Barbados. And when we travel through the Caribbean and all over the world, we see vending people with artfully decorated carts. And indeed, people are not running when a police arrive. And the offenses for vending are not criminal. So, member for St. James North, we are at this stage seeking to decriminalize vending through a policy initiative. And we have proposed to our cabinet, and the paper is sitting with cabinet presently, to address the matter whereby vending, similar to a ticketing system we use with our cards, we don't want to send persons to jail for vending. Vending must take its rightful place in the economic landscape of this country. Vending is commerce. Back in the days of the Huskrin, people in town would have come from the country in urban Barbados to sell okras and to sell yam and those and stuff. Why, if you are vending in an area that you shouldn't be vending in, I don't want to say illegally, I mean, there can be ticketing systems for those persons who ply their trade. And we as a ministry and as a government, and the Prime Minister, I want to congratulate the Prime Minister. It's the first time I'm calling her name. But decriminalizing vending, the member for St. Michael Northeast is passionate about it. And indeed, she has been justifiably on my case, and I want to thank her, to ensure that we get a comprehensive vending policy and new legislation to bring to book this year, in the year 2020-2021, to allow vendors in this country to take its rightful place in the economic landscape of this country. Member for St. James North, the whole aspect of the expungement that has been articulated in the draft that I have here in terms of vending and some of the matters that we would be looking at, and in terms of the decriminalization, the expungement of the records previously charged or in prison, the establishment of a ticketing or other penalty system for offenders who may contravene the relevant regulations or sections of the proposed act as specified by the act, the non-sale of alcohol by vendors in vending spaces, facilitation of regulation of all types for the vending, and the rights and obligation of vendors. Vendors have rights. Those are just some of the areas that we'll be discussing at our cabinet that we have proposed as a ministry to bring some respectability to vendors. And those who are listening out there, you will see us removing the National Insurance Building and the Prime Minister, creating a space for vending, that aspect of Bridgetown. But we have to go beyond Bridgetown as well. And I compliment her for it, and our ministry is working closely with the Ministry of Agriculture, the Ministry of Food and Fisheries, inter-collaboration, inter-ministerial collaboration. But I want to go to the vendors on the highway, those coconut vendors. When you travel, you see the coconut vendors within Trinidad and other Caribbean territories vending, and at the end of the day, you don't see the place looking untidy. They wear their shirts, and to demonstrate that they indeed have a stake in this development of Barbados, and in those countries they do. So we will go to artfully decorated, find a space on the highway, safe places that these vendors, these coconut vendors can vend. We are not stopping there. We will educate our vendors. We will create the necessary forum whereby the vendors, not only within this act, but we will put in it that vendors must indeed spend some others indeed going through how legitimate vending ought to be, and with the whole aspect of respect and the whole aspect of taking care of the environment. The verdict is out as to whether those vendors who are within the marketplaces, now we are discussing that aspect, because some of those vendors have been regulated, they are regulated, and they have a pretty good regime. But we now have to clean up our markets, paint them, make it look a place that these workers, when they come to vend, they're happy. When I did my walkthrough with the ministry, some of the vendors within the Bridgetown setting, just beyond Parliament, to the north of Parliament, no, to the north of Parliament, the northeast section of Parliament. I forgot the name of the vendor stall. All they requested, Palmetto Square, thank you. All they requested was for us to give them the level of respect that is due to them. Paint up the place. Make it a place that people would want to come, the tourists would want to come and vend. So this legislation, member for St. James North, speaks to not only decriminalizing and expunging, but speak to the whole the asset place, to clean up and make it tidy, and making it a place that tourists feel welcome. Tourists and Bajans, of course, we cannot forget our own. Thank you, member. For Christchurch East is in tune.
Madam Chairman, I would just use my final intervention to give the Minister an opportunity to speak about another legacy of the Honourable Member for St. Michael North at the Fair Trading Commission, and in terms of what developments and progress the Fair Trading Commission has made in terms of regulation in Barbados.
Madam Chair, thank you again, member for St. James North. Indeed, you're stretching the entire ministry. You're going into every aspect of the ministry. Fair Trading Commission is the regulator for utilities, fair competition, and consumer protection. The fair trading in those three areas over the years, and I want to go back to in history to come forward. We recall the sale of BNTCL, and indeed that was a fair competition matter that the Fair Trading intervened in. And the Fair Trading Commission, I would say to you, they have been doing their part in terms of regulating utilities in this country and fair competition. I just mentioned that one with respect to the sale of BNTCL to Sol. Fair Trading blocked that sale because they thought it was unfair competition. In terms of utility regulation, the Fair Trading Commission has been working closely with the Ministry of Energy. And indeed, I am pleased to report that the Fair Trading, they have finalized the setting of the tariff rates for renewable energy for less than 1 megawatt for investors in this country. And that is a breakthrough in terms of building investor confidence that investors can indeed invest in renewable energy. And at this time, I would pause and ask the Director of Utility Regulation, to take the seat here to my left and let her come and explain, because fair trading has a duty to ensure that the renewable energy sector is indeed built out. And we will come up with a policy that not only for investors, working closely with the Ministry of Energy, not only for investors below 1 megawatts of renewable energy in terms of a tariff rate, but that those persons who are interested in going above, like the 5 megawatts and up to 10 megawatts, have a policy framework whereby they can negotiate with the utility, but fair trading has a role to play in terms of making sure that the consumer is not charged high prices, too high a price, and that there's fair trade as it relates to regulating utilities in this country, and that the monopoly is properly regulated to ensure that the renewable energy sector and now the electricity sector is indeed such that the consumer is given a fair share in terms of electric bills, in terms of investors now who will invest in renewable energy, who will sell all of their electricity produced by renewable energy to the grid. We will work closely, or we have been working closely with the Ministry of Energy to ensure that that sector is built out and no one is taken advantage of, neither the utility or the consumer. But I will pass over to the Director of Utility Regulations, who will get into that aspect.
Good evening, Chair, as well as parliamentarians. My name is Dr. Marsha Athley Akechi. I'm the Director of Utility Regulation with the Fair Trading Commission. I note that the Minister spoke extensively on the fact that we have to engage a number of different stakeholders. And that is indeed true, because oftentimes when we speak of utility regulations, persons tend to think that we are a consumer advocate, which is not what we are. We have to balance the interests of three entities: government with their policies, we have to balance the interests of investors, and we also have to balance the interests of the consumer. So that is a delicate balance that we have to walk that sort of tightrope. In terms of renewable energy and what we have done thus far, the Minister would have spoken about the decision up to 1 megawatt and the feed-in tariff scheme that we have developed to that point. So within that decision, we would have given a number of ranges in terms of the rates based on capacities and the different types of technology. And that would allow for investors to have a contract knowing full well what their rate will be for a 20-year period. That offers certainty to the investor, whether it is a local investor or international one. In doing so, that provides a level of ease for any financier. With that, we expect that over the medium to long term, we would see a reduction in the cost of capital as associated with renewable energy projects. Beyond that, the Prime Minister has given us a mandate to look at developing feed-in tariffs for systems between 1 and 5 megawatts. That is definitely on the table for us. What is holding that back at this point is an amendment to the Utilities Regulation Act, and as well a concomitant amendment with the Fair Trading Commission Act. But we would hope to see those things happen within short order, because we know that we are assiduously working on those two things with CPC. So the 1 to 5 megawatt would allow for players that are with a bigger scale to come in and get in on the action. One of the critical things that we are sort of proud of is the fact that we've incorporated a community shared scheme that allows for the average Barbadian to pull together their resources to be able to get into this energy space. It speaks to what was the government's objective of democratizing the energy space, and that is one mechanism to do that. Earlier, there was talk about the cooperatives. That is another mechanism, and we gladly applaud that initiative. So the Commission is doing multiple things in order to be able to bring energy on board. One of the other things that we want to look at going forward is the whole idea of looking at storage and developing a framework for storage. That is a critical component for our build-out. If we are to achieve the levels of renewable energy, which is anticipated in a capacity of around 625 megawatts over the long term up to 2030, that means that using the resources that we have right now, which are primarily variable resources, that is wind and solar, which are variable, meaning that they cannot be relied upon for consistency as opposed to fossil fuel, which is base load and adds firm capacity. That means that we have to develop the framework for storage to allow for us to be able to provide some firming of the system. Storage does not only do that, it does a number of other things in terms of offering reliability to the grid, voltage and frequency regulation, a number of other things. So we have to develop that, not only in terms of providing energy, but understanding the various uses of storage and being able to value them accordingly. That is critical for how we go forward. The other component that I would want to speak to would be that of the methodology. How do we go, because we're about to issue a decision up to 5 megawatts, but we have to then go beyond that to look at the larger capacities. What methodology would be employed at those higher levels? There are two schools of thought, one being continue with the feed-in tariff mechanism, in which case the Commission, the onus is completely on the Commission to understand all the inputs and be able to develop a cost associated with that or a tariff. Well, on the other hand, if you go the route of competitive procurement, which is the preferred option internationally now based on best practice, then that allows for more of an auction type system where persons bid based on what is a viable business plan for them. Doing that allows persons to be closer to their marginal cost of operation, and you get lower cost that way. That is the model that the Commission is proposing to go, but a determination has to be made on that. I'll break to see if there are any more questions.
Madam Chair, I beg to move that you do now leave the chair and report progress to His Honor the Speaker. I beg leave to sit again.
Second. Question is, I do not report to His Honor the Speaker progress and ask for leave to sit again. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. Aye. All honorable members against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
The chairman has reported progress and requests leave to sit again. Honourable Leader, Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move that the House be suspended until 3 p.m. tomorrow afternoon. Huh?
Honourable Leader, Government Business.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that further consideration of the estimates be postponed until tomorrow at 3 p.m. in the afternoon.
The question is that further consideration and debate be postponed until tomorrow at 3 p.m. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it. Further consideration is postponed until 3 p.m. tomorrow. Honorable Leader, Government Business.
Mr. Speaker,
I wasn't provided with that on the order paper, that's why. I wasn't provided with it. Yeah, but I didn't get it. Yeah, continue, Honorable Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to give notice of a resolution to grant the sum of $1,011,082 from the Consolidation Fund and to place it at the disposal of the government to supplement the estimates 2019-2020 as shown in the supplementary estimates number 14, 2019-2020. I now beg, Mr. Speaker, to move the suspension of the sitting until 3 p.m. tomorrow.
The question is that this honorable chamber will be suspended until Tuesday at 3 p.m. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it. This honorable chamber is suspended until tomorrow at 3 p.m.